I got involved in race by thinking about how social class inequality works. So I come from a kind of working class background where when I was a child, my parents would send me to school in the correct school uniform, but then when I opened my mouth, they were terribly disappointed. You could see their body language change because my accent betrayed that I was from a working class background, and the teacher's expectations immediately went down. So I registered that, I understood how that operated, and when I started to look at inequalities across education, at the time that I started many years ago, there was very little work looking at race inside schools. People looked at the numbers and then invented reasons why that group would do less well. And I already knew from having been a student in a multi-ethnic school that the black kids in my school were in the bottom set, that they were expected to be good at running but not clever. And nobody was writing about that. So when I finished my first degree, I wanted to do research, and the idea was to go into a school and document how that kind of thing happened on a day-to-day basis. And the more I looked into racism, the more it dominated everything that I did. So it's just something that I can't not do. Well, I was introduced to critical race theory through an American student. I was working, I would have called myself an anti-racist. So I was using critical theory, trying to see beneath the surface at how power operates. And I had an American graduate student who was looking at disability, but using critical race theory. And he kept telling me that all the things I was arguing about, I really needed to read this stuff from America. And when I read it, it was like one of those cartoons where a light goes off, because everything made sense, but it wasn't just describing things I already knew. It was putting it in a different framework and asking me questions that would not have occurred to me before. So it took what I already knew, put it in a very insightful and systematic framework that then required you to do more work and to be actively involved. I don't think you can be a critical race theorist if all you do is sit behind a desk and write. I think you have to live the work as well. You have to get involved with activist groups. So CRT to me was just an enormous advance on where I was. And I think part of the reason why it's so popular in many parts of the world now is that the ideas are just so powerful, and people around the world are adding to those ideas. I think CRT will be better for the fact that people outside the US are now contributing. But it was just such a powerful framework. Well, everybody has an opinion about neoliberalism. I don't think there's a single critical race theory perspective on neoliberalism. There are lots of different perspectives within it. I would say that a CRT perspective identifies that neoliberalism is a racial project. It's not a political project that happens to have racial elements. It's fundamentally about a racial and a class project. David Theo Goldberg has written about racial neoliberalism, and I'm not sure if he would describe himself as a critical race theorist, but certainly his take on neoliberalism as a racial project I think fits very well with the work that critical race theorists do, identifying how race absolutely saturates the mechanism, even though the mechanism pretends to have nothing to do with race. And certainly neoliberalism on a global scale has widened race inequalities and normalized racism to an extent that I think we haven't seen probably since the Second World War.